Hey my fellow Druids, Zaior here bringing you a video where we go over everything related to the Druid for the next PoE2 league that's just around the corner. I want to remind you that we have a Discord where we can discuss and talk about the best Druid builds in PoE2. We can also make progress together on building this, since I want to assign roles to the best crafters and theory crafters to keep helping the community and so we can share all our knowledge. You will find the link in the description of this video and also on my channel. Don't forget that if you enjoy the content, leaving a like and subscribing will help this channel grow and reach more RPG players around the world. Thank you. Okay, I want to start with an important point, which is the performance improvement. I didn't really understand or know that this was going to happen in this patch, but honestly the improvement was very necessary, and on top of that, the improvement is very big. Alright, let's get straight to it. Let's talk about the Druid, the new class coming to PoE2 that looks truly spectacular to play. The first thing we have to talk about for the Druid is the ability to shapeshift or change form, which is tied to a talisman. Why do I want to mention this? Because the talisman is what gives you the ability to change into bear, wolf or wyvern form, which is kind of like an armless dragon or something like that, so we can understand each other. And also gives you the ability to use skill gems for these forms. I mention this because apparently the talisman is a weapon, which means any class could use it and transform, and in theory that could be the case, since that's how they explained in the video the other day. Although in my opinion, I hope it's a weapon that only the Druid can use, since the Druid identity is being able to shapeshift. It will honestly be pretty disappointing if every class could shapeshift, but well, the point is we have a Druid in PoE2 and we are starting with the class anyway. Okay, let's go with the bear form. As you can imagine, it focuses on slow and heavy attacks. It has a resource called Rage that builds up while you attack, and apparently when we are full on this resource, we get more damage, some skills hit harder or last longer for example. All of this is based on the amount of Rage we'll build up and spend. That's basically the interaction this resource has with the class. In fact, this lets you build Rage in bear form and then use a skill in wolf form or in your original Druid form to create certain synergizes as you switch forms. And this lets you constantly change forms instead of staying stuck in just one, which is the whole point of this class. Besides this, the bear has shot style abilities that break enemy armor, stomp type abilities that hit the ground, very brute force mechanics, so we will likely end up with a kind of hybrid strength plus intelligence build if we want our bear to deal most of the damage. Then we have a special mechanic, which is a roar the bear has, which is a meta gem. Remember, these meta gems allow you to socket shouts from other classes, meaning we could use shouts like the Barbarian Seismic Shout with this gem. So we could create some really interesting synergizers. And on top of all this, we have this ability which personally I really like it. Call it Walking Calamity. The idea is honestly pretty simple. First, you accumulate glory while you are in bear form. You gain glory every time you generate rage while you are already capped on rage. When you fill that invisible bar of glory, you can activate Walking Calamity. Second, when you activate the skill, the show begins. For 10 seconds, meteorites fall around your character constantly. Every 0.05 seconds, a small meteorite lands. Every 20 small meteorites, a big one falls that does way more damage and has a bigger radius. And all of this happens automatically, as long as you stay in bear form. It also has extra benefits while it's active. You regenerate rage per second, you gain part of your damage as fire damage, the area around you gets covered in fire on the ground after big meteor strikes. In summary, it's basically an automatic meteor berserker mode. Okay, with wolf form we have a more agile, faster playstyle, and it's also focused on cold damage, which personally it's my favorite. In summary, we have these main abilities for wolf form. Let's explain them quickly so you can get a general idea of how this will work in practice. We start with Lunar Assault, which is basically a werewolf attack focused on cold damage. It turns you into a werewolf, hits fast, and is designed to shield and freeze enemies massively thanks to huge multipliers. It's a simple but powerful skill with a very direct design. You hit, you apply tons of shield, you build freeze, total control. Next, we have Cross Slash, and I will give you a more thematic description of how this skill works. First, you transform into a wolf and jump backwards while tearing the ground with both claws. If you hit a marked enemy with both claws, the mark gets triggered and creates an extra shockwave, more AoE damage. This is important. When the two attacks lines cross, ice shards get pulled into that point and explode, causing even more damage. So you can use this skill while weaving other abilities to interrupt animations. This makes it a weavable skill very useful for mobility technical combat. It's a more advanced skill for rotations with marks and explosions. Lastly, we have Lunar Blessing, which basically works like this. Very simple. You transform into a werewolf, you offer your rage to the moon, this activates a very strong buff. While the buff is active, you get extra cold damage, you attack faster, you move faster, your wolves also hit harder. All the rage you gain during the buff extends its duration. And the most important thing, every time you hit, a moonbeam, a beam of lunar light, falls on the enemy. In summary, Lunar Blessing is a mega buff for werewolf. More cold damage, more speed, more duration thanks to rage, your hits call lunar beams that explode in cold damage. It's an offensive plus defensive buff. The wolf form also has a pack mechanic where killing marked enemies summons wolves to fight with you, which I think is very good and fun to play. We also have a meta skill to place more marks like freezing mark, so we can mark more enemies and maintain better consistency with our pack. If you like cold skills and fast, agile movement, this is definitely the playstyle you want with wolf form. Let's continue with the form that has gotten the most attention these days. The wyvern form the Druid gets in PoE 2, which is a kind of melee plus range dragon-like form. This one has a passive that marks enemies and has a mechanic where you can eat corpse to generate power charge, and then your abilities get charged up, so to speak, gaining benefits like more lightning damage or more AoE. Our first ability in this form is Wind Blast. Wind Blast is a Druid skill that transforms you into a wyvern for a moment and hits with a powerful wind flap that pushes you backwards, pushes enemies backwards. If an enemy is primed for a heavy stun, then they get stunned, they release a shockwave, and you have a small chance to gain a power charge. Also, it doesn't generate stun build up on its own. It has a 6-meter range on the flap, and the shockwave reaches 12 meters. In summary, you transform, hit with a blast of wind, retreat, push enemies, and if they were ready for heavy stun, you create an explosion and gain power charge. Perfect for control builds, knockback plays, and heavy stun synergizes. Next, we have the ability Devour. Devour attack for the Druid in pathofexile 2 is a hybrid melee plus healing tool that takes advantage of corpse on the battlefield. Its main function is to instantly transform the Druid into a wyvern to attack. This ability can consume corpse, meaning it can consume a killable enemy or nervy corpses. This is key. Next is another ability called Oil Barrage. Oil Barrage is a ranged projectile attack focused on area control and reducing elemental resistances. Its main function is that the Druid transforms into a wyvern to speed a barrage of oil projectiles. It creates an area where the projectiles land and leave oil ground for 6 seconds. It has a slow and exposure. Any enemy on the oil ground is slowed by 20% and receives exposure, which lowers all their elemental resistances by 20%. This helps you or your party deal more elemental damage. It also has a channeled empowered mode. If you have power charge, you can channel the ability to unleash and sustain barrage of electrified oil. This mode doesn't create ground effects, but fires projectiles in sequence, allowing multiple hits on the same target for huge single target damage. Great for bosses. In summary, it's a versatile ability that lets you control enemy positioning and boost your team's elemental damage, with a power-up mode for massive single target DPS. Next is Flame Breath. Flame Breath is a channeled AoE ability focused on sustained fire damage and powerful ignite. Its main function is that the Druid transforms into a wyvern and channels a stream of fire that burns enemies in AoE. It has a rage mechanic. The first 4 seconds of channeling are free. After that, it consumes rage per second to stay active. You can gain rage while using this ability. It has a power charge and power. If you have a power charge every level, the ability gets boosted. You gain extra lightning damage. 50% of the damage is lightning. Rage is spent 50% slower, allowing longer duration. Finally, it deals massive ignite damage. The ability converts all physical damage to fire and has plus 750% ignite magnitude, meaning it applies extremely strong burning effects. In summary, it's a fire channeling ability that excels at ignite damage and area control, with a power-up mode that adds lightning damage and better resource efficiency for longer burst windows. We also have the abilities in human form, so to speak, or his normal form, which focus on nature magic. Basically, he is a spellcaster. Let's take a look at his main abilities. We start with Volcano. The ability Volcano in pathofexile 2 is a channeled fire spell that creates a permanent structure on the battlefield, centered around sustained area, damage, and projectiles. Its main function is to create a volcano from the ground that stays for 8 seconds. Enemies standing on it take damage. It has an initial eruption mechanic where, by channeling the ability, you cause the initial eruption to be more violent, shooting out more projectiles from the start. It also has a slam mechanic. While the volcano exists, you can use slam ability to cause another burst of projectiles manually. It has a sustained style, meaning the volcano automatically fires 3 projectiles every 0.5 seconds. But it has a limit and distraction, since you can only have 1 volcano active at the time, and it is destroyed after 10 manual slams. In summary, it's a strategic fire spell that lets you place a damage-generating structure on the battlefield, which you can manually power with your slam abilities. We have another ability called Entangle. The ability Entangle in pathofexile 2 is an area of effect spell focused on crowd control and sustained physical damage through persistent structures on the battlefield. Its main function is that the Druid conjures a fissure of roots that travels along the ground, dealing physical damage to enemies in its paths. It has a persistent mechanic where the fissure remains on the ground for 8 seconds. While it's active, binds emerge from it. This ability has control and sustain damage, where the binds automatically latch onto nearby enemies and dealing damage and slowing them by 50% per bind attach. This ability has limitations and potential, meaning you can have up to 4 fissures at once. Each enemy can have up to 3 binds attached. It also has interactions with Overground, where Overground fissures, likely a specific state of passive for the Druid, last 50% longer and can attach up to 2 additional binds per enemy. In summary, it's a utility and control spell that lets you fill the battlefield with root traps that slow and passively damage enemies, great for keeping them and by amplifying zone control. We also have this ability that deals lightning damage, and it's probably one of the strongest. I'm talking about Thunderstorm. The ability Thunderstorm in pathofexile 2 is a sustained area of effect spell focused on elemental crowd control and synergize with other lightning and ice abilities. Its main function is that the Druid conjures a persistent storm in an area for 12 seconds that strike with lightning and rain. It has a key mechanic, Drench, where enemies inside the area become drenched. This state is fundamental, because the elemental control effect of being drenched gives enemies 50% increased chance to receive the shock ailment, and they receive 25% more build-up toward being frozen. It has sustained damage, where the storm hits a target every 0.35 seconds, applying constant lightning damage. It has an interaction with plants, where plants inside the storm become overgrown, which can interact with the other Druid abilities. However, we have limitations, since you can only have 1 Thunderstorm active at the time. In summary, it's a strategic placement ability that establishes a persistent danger zone, greatly amplifying the effectiveness of your lightning and ice abilities against drenched enemies. To finish with the abilities of this spellcaster Druid, we have the one that catches my attention the most, and that is a Spell Totem. The ability Spell Totem in pathofexile 2 is a key metagem for the Druid in his human form, allowing you to automate the casting of other spells you have socket. Its main function is that instead of casting a spell yourself, this gem lets you summon a totem that automatically casts the linked spell for you. It has an activation cost, since summoning the totem has a price. You must consume 3 power charts or 3 endurance charts, and these charts are naturally generated by the Druid in his bear and wyvern forms, encouraging synergize between forms. It has benefits based on charge, where consuming power charge gives 10% more spell damage per charge for the totem, 30% total, and consuming endurance charge gives 20% more life and 20% more duration for the totem per charge. But we have limitations, since the totem lasts 8 seconds and you can only have 1 active at the time. Also, linked spells suffer penalties of 13% less damage and 20% less cast speed by default. We could give it strategic uses, since it's perfect for building combos. You can summon a volcano, roots, or a storm with the totem and then switch to your animal form to take advantage of the persistent effects while the totem keeps working. In summary, it's a versatile gem that lets you delegate your spells to a totem by consuming charge. freeing the Druid to shapeshift and keep interacting with the battlefield. This wraps up the part about abilities and the forms that come with the Druids this new PoE2 league. Also, as soon as I have access to the skill tree, gems and Ascendancy, I will start theory crafting possible builds we will be able to create with this class. Because based on what we have seen so far, making synergizes between totems plus shapeshifting or even a minion build with the Oracle sounds very interesting to try. Let's continue with the Ascendancies, since the Druid will come with two Ascendancies, the Shaman and the Oracle. Let's start with the Shaman. So what does the Shaman basically have? The Shaman is focused on elemental forces, meaning abilities and damage centered on cold, fire and lightning. We can also transform into animals, as I mentioned before, obviously. But why do I say it's focused on these types of elemental damage? One of these passives in this Ascendancy deals damage based on the rage you have. For example, we gain rage with the bear, and then we spend that rage to deal fire damage, which is where the bear is stronger. Or we gain rage and then cast a lightning ability to use it with the wyvern form. Some key points this Ascendancy has, the Shaman, is that it has a talent that unlocks exclusive modifiers on runes or idols. For example, on some special rune we use with the Shaman, like they show in the video the other day, it adds another modifier to that rune, giving us more modifiers for our build. I also saw another point called Bringer the Apocalypse, which literally makes it so that when you deal damage of some type, it drains the same type of damage. If you deal fire, fire falls from above, and so on with the other elements. In general, it will be an Ascendancy for playing with elemental damage and the synergize we will build with our forms. We also have the other one, the Oracle. It literally uses premonition, meaning it can see the future using its abilities. If you watch the gameplay from the other day, you saw ghost-like figures casting a fire ability. Well, if you cast that same ability, you replace it, and by using the ability the Oracle cast, you will get more damage. It's kind of weird because they also appear during boss fights, but if you follow what the Oracle is showing, you can get extra damage. It's pretty interesting how it works, and it could be effective. We did have to see exactly how it works in detail. Another thing the Oracle has that's very interesting and strong is that when you choose this Ascendancy, the skill tree gains more passives than what's already available, as you can see in the background video in that area. So we will have a huge amount of passive in this part of the tree. It's crazy. In fact, we shouldn't rule of having some kind of minion Oracle, it will be insane, honestly. There are also more changes and additions to the game overall, for example adding 30 new support gems, the new endgame mechanic, among other nerfs and buffs. My opinion regarding the Druid is that honestly I'm very hyped to try it, and I couldn't tell you for sure if the new character will be super broken or if it will be a mandatory pick. Since the changes we have seen so far still put the die as the most broken character without question with its lightning arrow. What the Druid does have, it's a great mechanic of shapeshifting and making very interesting synergizes. To give you a preview of the first thing that comes to my mind, using the Shaman Ascendancy plus a spell totem with Thunderstorm plus Wyvern and taking advantage of lightning synergizes. Or for example, using the bird to build rage, then amplifying fire abilities in human form plus the totem, then switching back to bird form and applying all the physical damage abilities so the fire abilities trigger. Or also taking advantage of a wall freeze and a spell totem to use the comet ability, for example. Honestly, I'm a fan of elemental power in this type of game, so I think I will go for the Shaman to take advantage of all the synergizes that shapeshifting with the Druid has. Okay, my Druids? That's the video for today to start getting into what the Druid is in PoE2 and what's coming very soon. If you enjoyed the content, leaving a like and subscribing helps this channel grow so I can keep bringing and improving the quality of the content. I hope you enjoyed it. See you.